On April 13th, 2004, American rapper, Senegalese electricity provider, and six-time husband Akon released his debut single titled Locked Up. You know the one I'm talking about. I'm locked up, they won't let me out. Fire. It was the jailhouse anthem that was inspired by what Akon described as a 3-year stretch where he had time in the slammer to reflect on his street life and focus on crafting music that would lead to a better life.
Well, the record was basically written when I was, in the joint. It was like basically I had nothing but time in there to just reflect on everything I was doing while I was out. It was actually a blessing for me because the route where I was going, honestly, had I continued that, I wouldn't know where I'd be today. So, and it was just obvious to me because sitting up in there, I knew this wasn't the life that I wanted to do or spend for the rest of my life. But at the end of the day, I knew I was between a rock and a hard place because now getting out with a criminal history, you couldn't work in a Fortune 500 company or even have the opportunities to become rich.
Now, Akon actually claims to have written Locked Up in jail, where it naturally became a favourite amongst fellow convicts and guards alike.
I'm in there, it's right, it's just right. You should know, I thought about it one day, I'm sitting like, damn, I'm actually locked up. Can you believe it? They ain't gonna let me up out. And I'm walking through the pod, and just next thing you know, I'm just singing, I'm locked up, they won't let me out. They won't let me out, I'm locked up. So it became an anthem over there, because every time, COs come through, they're like, yo, Con, sing that, son. Yo, Con, sing that, son. And I be there like, I'm locked up. So it was like an anthem in there. People remembered it. And I was like, yo, as soon as I get out, I'm going to record that. Because that'll be a big record.
Now, Akon actually says that after getting out of jail, having written that street hit Locked Up when he was inside, he then took that certified hit song and begun to execute on a 10-year plan that he devised in jail to get himself rich, the legal way.
So that's when I created a 10-year plan in there and just came out and started executing on it. That 10-year plan ended up being executed within 5 years. So then from there, it was like, okay, now let's turn other tables and figure out other areas to become successful at.
So make no mistake that Akon's entire career seems to be predicated massively on his identity as a convict who did time in jail. I mean, after all, his label is called Convict Music.
Convict. What's that about?
Convict is the label that I just started.
His second album was called Convicted. I mean, hell, what do you even think the con in Akon means? It's not a confidence coach. It's not a contact lens. And it's certainly not a condom. He doesn't use those. No, Akon. It stands for a convict. I mean, this guy and his entire career is defined in every single way by being locked up. Only problem is, it turns out that Akon is a little bit of Akon man. Because after all that success, it would turn out that Akon hadn't been entirely upfront with us about being locked up. Now, Akon's song Locked Up was a runaway success. The track landed at number 8 on the Billboard charts, and it went top 20 internationally over in the likes of France, Germany, Spain, and Switzerland. And the album that it was from, titled Trouble, which also spawned the smash hit Lonely, hit number 18 on Billboard, and Call Blimey, it even went number 1 in the United Kingdom. And of course, when it released, Locked Up became the street anthem for any law-breaking goons who had done wrong in the past, gotten locked up, and were trying to change their ways. And off of the back of the runaway success of this song, Akon became the poster boy for rappers who had spent time in the slammer. And of course, with all this newfound attention came the interviews. And of course, Akon was ready and raring to reminisce on his good old days of being locked in the slammer with anybody that was willing to listen.
I know it's crazy, but me getting locked up, I always looked at it like a life lesson, because it always made me stronger. When I got locked up, it really made me evaluate. Not only am I ashamed of a lot of things that happened, I couldn't believe I had the heart to do a lot of that stuff.
But of course, the one question that I know is on a lot of people's minds right now, why did Akon get locked up? Well, according to him, he was the ringleader of a notorious car theft operation.
After I got out of prison, I ended up doing 3 years for being a ringleader of a notorious car theft operation. Came out, couldn't get a regular job. I don't think I could really fall back on was my music. So, come to find out, the hobby eventually saved my life. I wasn't stealing them and taking the chop shops. I owned 4 chop shops in Atlanta. Literally own chop shops.
In a VH1 interview, he claimed to literally snatch cars off the street.
We used to literally snatch cars away from people. And they would be traumatized for months, like, ah!
For real, Akon was actually out here committing grand theft autos, like some sort of auto-tuned Tommy Vercetti. And apparently his gang specialized in boosting Porsches, Lambos, Mercs, and selling them to celebrities and drug dealers. He even claimed to frequently have high-speed chases with the cops on some Need for Speed Most Wanted shit.
If I had to describe what I was going through when I was stealing cars and all the police chases and all that, I can definitely say I was in that state of mind of Get rich or die trying.
But of course, as we all know, you can only boost so many cars before you rack up a tidy little wanted level. And eventually, Akon was of course busted, when he says he was sent away to the slammer for 3 years.
I was in there for 3 years.
In fact, later on in a Rolling Stone interview, Akon claimed that the only reason that he'd got caught by the cops that time is because he was driving a BMW 325, which was apparently way too slow to get away from the cops. Oh come on Akon, you mean to tell me you're the ringleader of a notorious car operation and you don't have NOS installed? Pull the other one. Anyway, Akon points to this particular incident, getting caught in the slow-moving BMW 325, as the incident that got him 3 years in the slammer, apparently being served between 1999 and 2001. Only problem is, in 2008, popular muckraking website The Smoking Gun did an investigation, concluding that not only had Akon never served a 3-year sentence, but it would actually turn out that in that particular case with the slow BMW, all of the charges were dropped and he didn't even end up getting a conviction. Not such a con after all, are we? Now, if you're a keen-eyed Akon fan, you might remember a 2008 incident where Akon found himself in hot water after going all WWE on a teenage fan that threw a pretzel at him on stage. I know, you can't make this shit up. Anyway, after tossing this teenage boy's salad right off stage, Akon ended up getting charged with harassment and endangering the welfare of a child. In exchange for this, he ended up only paying a measly $350 fine and was forced to do 65 hours of community service. Now, I'm not sure how many hours of community service you get for providing electricity to 600 million Africans, but I assume it's a lot. But following his court appearance, some people begun to notice it was a little bit peculiar that Akon was quickly released without bail, despite his supposed notorious past as the real-life CJ. You know, remember, this guy was locked up, they won't let him out, but apparently after he threw a kid off stage, they just let him walk right out without bail. It's all a little bit sus, isn't it? Come on, Akon, how did you go from the rap game gone in 60 seconds to posting Bond in 60 seconds? Anyway, this seemingly glaring discrepancy prompted people to take a closer inspection at Akon's seemingly criminal past. And so in April 2008, The Smoking Gun released an explosive 3,900-word investigation that claimed Akon's criminal career and the resulting prison time were, in their words, exaggerated, embellished, or wholly fabricated, even going as far as to suggest that the con in Akon's name should stand for contrived, savage. And the article went on to point out a number of explosive holes in Akon's supposed backstory. And they had the receipts to back it up too, producing over 16 court documents that supported their claims. So, what was Akon lying about? Well, first off, he's not completely squeaky clean. Akon's rap sheet does indeed have half a dozen arrests, but he was only ever convicted of 1 crime. So you remember that arrest that he spoke about in Rolling Stone? That big case that he transformed into his career headline, the Gone in 60 Seconds style Grand Theft Auto ring that Akon was the ringleader of. Well, it turns out he'd actually just been caught by cops in a stolen Beamer a couple of times. First off, one incident in Atlanta where he was caught driving a stolen 7 Series. Apparently, after he was pulled over, Akon showed paperwork that should have shown that he was the rightful owner of the car, but the cops managed to see through this as fabricated. And it's possible that this was the incident that inspired that famous lyric in Locked Up, "My registration." Now for this, the cops actually charged Akon with possession of stolen property, forgery, and driving with an altered vehicle identification. I mean, Akon was out here looking like the 98 Pop Smoke. But anyway, here's where the story gets really crazy. Because Akon gets booked into DeKalb County Jail, held on a $20,000 bond which he couldn't raise. I guess they didn't accept Akon. But of course you know what that means. He's locked up, they won't let him out for at least 5 months. But then, eventually out of nowhere, that case was dropped in its entirety in late '99. After Akon had indeed spent 5 months in jail, waiting for an indictment that never came. And it turns out that this was for a bizarre reason, because that car that Akon was driving was stolen 3 months before he was caught with it. And it just so happened that that car was stolen from a wealthy financier who collected rare vintage guitars, one of which was in that BMW when it was stolen and was apparently worth between $100,000 and $250,000. Now, fortunately, before driving to Akon's supposed chop shop, whoever nicked the car threw that piece of garbage guitar onto the side of the road, where fortunately it was eventually discovered. Anyway, the guitar and the car eventually did find their way back to their rightful owner, and Akon found himself a free man with no repercussions of driving that hot whip. However, both before and after that case in Atlanta, Akon had also been stopped driving stolen Beamers back in New Jersey. In fact, him and his Cody were indicted in September 1998 for handgun possession and receiving of stolen property in reference to the stolen 325 Beamer that Akon had referenced before. And so eventually in June 1999, after getting out of jail after waiting around for 5 months for that 7 Series charge to get dropped, Akon struck a deal with prosecutors to plead guilty to the gun charge in return for the state dropping stolen car charges. And as part of that deal, Akon agreed to be transferred back to Georgia to serve 3 years probation. not locked up. And yes, that gun charge is the only felony arrest amongst the 6 arrests that he had gotten in that 3-year period. At least this is what the smoking gun claims in their expose. And while you're there, it did really seem like the smoking gun had it in for Akon. They'd even contacted the old-ass cops that had dealt with Akon's cases for quotes, and apparently those cops even laughed at Akon's claims that he had been the ringleader of a supposed car-boosting operation, describing him as an arrogant SOB whose only involvement was wanting to drive high-dollar vehicles. But let's not forget, 12. But anyway, regardless of whatever vendetta the smoking gun had against Akon, you can't deny the facts. And as the documents show, Akon's probation ended in late 2001 because apparently he had been a model probationer over this period of 3 years probation. That period, 1999 to 2001. Of course, the exact period that Akon was supposedly locked up for 3 years. Quite frankly, a damning outcome for Akon and his street credentials. But before you judge Akon, maybe you should take a little look at just how he decided to respond to these allegations. So, these were some explosive claims, and of course Akon wasn't going to stay hush about it. And so Akon eventually did respond to these rumours in an exclusive interview with the legendary Vlad TV, where he sort of cleared things up.
Yeah, I recall, reading the smoking gun article as well.
Exactly.
Smoking gun could have just called me directly. I would have given them all the answers. It's a good opportunity for them to get ratings and, hits on the site.
He basically explained that the article was just smoking gun clickbait.
The question was never whether or not I got locked up. That's how I got the idea of writing the song in the first place. Hadn't I gotten locked up, I would have never even made a thought of writing that song. I was a kind of artist that always wrote about experiences and what I went through in my life.
He doubled down on the fact that he was locked up at least for a period of time, and said that if you add up every little sentence that he got, he did do 3 years in the slammer total.
The question was, did I do 3 years in jail? Yes, I did 3 years. I just didn't do 3 straight years. As time was going on, I was constantly getting locked up. 2 months here, 5 months here, 6 months here, 7 months here. When they asked me, I said, yeah, if I had to add up all the times I was locked up, I probably could easily qualify to add up to maybe 3 years.
Sure, it's a low-key sidestep to all of those allegations, but you can't say Akon was never locked up. And to be fair, the smoking gun doesn't really go into detail into what he was up to between 01 and 04. Maybe he's right. And you certainly can't say he didn't address this situation and man up and give his side of the story. But in some ways, it was even more revealing when he sat down with MTV News to respond to the allegations in a slightly more evasive way, where he basically just sidestepped the whole thing, saying that everyone's entitled to their own opinions, and that delving back into the past to dig up old negative stories makes no sense to him when he is moving forward on positive things. Also pointing out that his convict movement and all the positivity in his life that he has achieved through music is what has taken him forward out of that old life, which is something that he would rather forget. And I know it's ironic, but to be honest, this interview, where he says less than he did in the Vlad interview, if anything, proves his point even more. Because while it's absolutely true that he clearly embellished his criminal past, fluffing it up way beyond what was necessary, you gotta ask yourself, why would he do this? It's because, at least at the time, hip-hop truly respected tough gangster types. And sure, spinning your 5-month sentence where you didn't actually end up getting convicted into a 3-year sentence because you did 3 years probation might be a little bit cheeky. And yeah, sure, naming your label Convict Music, your album Convicted, and your own rap name literally being Akon, a convict, is definitely a bit of a finesse. But you know what? Akon did it for all the right reasons. Because it was that finessing and embellishing that got Akon out of a life of petty crime. He didn't want to be hustling on the street or driving around in stolen whips. It was this embellishing of his prison time that took him from a 2-bit street hustler to a multi-platinum recording artist. Now he's got exotic mansions and luxury cars coming out of his arse. How can you really hate on a hungry hustler who was willing to wear whatever hat he needed to get rich quick? Because really, isn't that what hip-hop's all about? Well, it certainly is in 2020, and frankly, knowing that Akon is a master finesser only makes me like him